Welcome back. Now we're going to talk about ethical frameworks. This video will discuss the process of making ethical decisions and how we approach ethical issues. To illustrate approaches to ethical decision making, I'm going to propose a hypothetical. Let's say that you are on a library statistics task force, working with other librarians and administrators to decide what information should be tracked in order to guide internal decision making, reports to external entities like the Association of Academic Health Sciences Libraries, and reports to the larger institution. In this process, a colleague suggests having librarians forward the names of library champions for future interviews as a way to collect qualitative data about library interactions. You feel uneasy about this suggestion. What do you do? Here, I propose four possible approaches to thinking through this problem. You could A, discuss the possible outcomes of compiling such a list with your team. B, look to your professional association's rulebook or guidance on compiling a list like this. Or C, discuss what one of your mentors or role models would do in this situation. Or D, discuss your responsibilities to your patrons as a librarian or library worker. Each of these four approaches is tied to a specific ethical framework. Take a moment here to think about which of these four options feels closest to your own possible approach. I will give you roughly 30 seconds. I hope you had the opportunity to consider how you would approach this problem. Let's go through each option. So the first option was to examine possible outcomes. This approach corresponds to consequentialism. The outrageously quick summary of consequentialism is that actions should be judged by their consequences. A possible response informed by consequentialism is, after weighing the possible benefits of maintaining such a list with the risks, the group decides that the library champions may feel like their privacy was violated if such a list were maintained. So the group decides against collecting those names. This is only one of many possible conclusions that one could come to if approaching this issue from a consequentialist framing. The second option was to review a professional association's guidance. This approach corresponds to deontology. The outrageously quick summary of deontology is that actions should be judged based on their adherence to moral norms or universal moral laws. You can see here a lot of space for disagreement amongst deontologists. What are our moral norms? What should be the universal moral laws? Now, setting these arguments aside, a possible response informed by this approach is that the group reviews guidance on evaluation practices from the Medical Library Association, and they follow that guidance. The next option was to consider what a role model would do. This roughly corresponds to virtue ethics. The quick summary of virtue ethics is that actions should be judged based on whether they build the character or virtue of the agent taking that action. As opposed to centering obligations or responsibilities, like deontology, or consequences and outcomes, like consequentialism, virtue ethics focuses on virtue. A possible response informed by virtue ethics is that the group decides that they want to be the type of people who welcome patron input, and they decide that these interviews are necessary in order to receive feedback to improve themselves and the library. And the final option was to consider your responsibilities to your patrons. This corresponds to social contract theory. The quick summary of social contract theory is that people have obligations to social institutions and vice versa, as structured by social norms. A possible response informed by this approach is that the group decides that they have an obligation to represent their patrons' opinions in strategic decision making. So they decide it is important to pursue interviews and collect the names of possibly interested patrons. Now, some key takeaways from this discussion of ethical frameworks. First, a framework can inform but does not dictate a response. Two consequentialists, for example, might have extremely different opinions on how best to handle a specific situation. Relatedly, within one framework, there is nearly infinite space for disagreement. There are many subcategories under each framework I've described. Those subcategories may have directly conflicting values. Next, few of us are strictly one of these categories. Outside of an ethics department, I think it is unlikely that someone would describe themselves as a consequentialist. A lot of us take different approaches to different problems. That is not inherently an issue. However, if you find yourself taking a different approach than usual, it is helpful to ask yourself why. Noting when you are making changes in your decision making process may help you pinpoint bias in your thinking. And finally, in our work, discussions and decisions are frequently a team process. This can make ethical decision making much more complicated. Thank you for your time. Our next video will cover ethical values.